Hi class, and welcome to chapter 37, video notes number 2. So we're going to start off with 3712. So we're going to talk about disturbances. This is a prominent feature in a lot of communities. Now this is going to relate once again to the abiotic and biotic limiting factors that we talked about in the previous chapter. So a disturbance is any event that can damage biological communities. Okay, so remember what a community is. So it's a bunch of different species living within a set area. So this can be anything from a storm to a fire, flood, droughts. Overgrazing is something that a lot of places are really struggling with right now, with all the different cows and all the meat that we're trying to produce for human consumption, or any kind of human activity. So we talked a little bit about humans destructing the rainforest, logging. Anything that humans can do to ruin a community is also a disturbance. So the types, frequency, and severity, or the amount of effect, negative effect, so severity, of disturbances is going to vary depending on the community. So communities change drastically following a severe disturbance. Okay, so if we have an extremely severe disturbance, such as a hurricane or a tornado or a volcano or something that wipes out a lot of the land, we can have something proceed called ecological succession. Okay, so this is a colonization by a variety of species. Okay, a success of change gradually replaces other species. So this is a severe disturbance. This is where most of the land, plants, and animals are wiped out. So we're going to have a succession of different species that come in and recolonize that area. So what we have first is primary succession. This begins in a virtually lifeless area. So if there's a volcano that's wiped through and destroys all the land, plants, and everything around in that colony, what's going to happen is primary succession. So it begins in virtually lifeless area, and there's not even soil. Secondary succession is when a disturbance destroys an existing community, but there's soil still intact. Okay, so over time, this is kind of showing what happens over time, the succession of an area. So we'll start out, we have to rebuild our soil in primary succession. We'll start out with some annual plants, which means year to year. Okay, they have to be replanted, or seeds have to be distributed year to year. Perennial plants and grasses are what comes up every single year that doesn't have to be replanted. These are my favorite kinds of flowers to plant in the yard because every single year they come up, and all you have to do is water them. And then we have shrubs, softwood trees such as pines, and then we have our hardwood trees like our oaks, our more sturdy trees. Okay, so ecosystem ecology emphasizes energy flow. Okay, so this is really, really important because this is what bases our food pyramids that we were talking about and our food webs. So all the organisms in a community, as well as the abiotic environment, is our ecosystem. Remember, that was the biggest part of our triangle. Components of ecosystems is energy flow and chemical cycling, and we'll talk a lot more about chemical cycling towards the end of the chapter. Energy flow is the passage of energy throughout an ecosystem. So we all know where that energy starts with the sun. So a terrarium, which some of you may have talked about before in middle school, has the components of an ecosystem. It's something that is pretty much the most familiar type of ecosystem within the scientific community, and when you guys are learning about ecosystems in general level science classes, okay? Because it's really, really easy to understand the illustration of the energy flow. Okay, so here we go. We always start with that light energy, okay? So from the sun, that's our ultimate source of energy. So our light energy flows into the plants, and they turn it into chemical energy, because remember, photosynthesis, they make their own food, which they convert into ATP. Well, heat energy is also released. Okay, chemical elements and chemical cycling occurs throughout. Okay, so we have chemical nutrients in the soil, and we have things living within the soil that produce nutrients, which the plant uses to grow, which harvests energy from the sun. So it's just a complete cycle. Okay, and of course off to the side it shows bacteria and fungi, because those are our decomposers, which is really important because that's what gets our energy back into the soil in the first place. Okay, so 37.15, primary producers. This is going to set the energy budget for ecosystems. Okay, so we have primary production, which is the amount of solar energy converted to chemical energy. Okay, so think about solar energy, the sun, actually taken in by the plants and converting it to chemical energy, or ATP, what they can use to perform functions. It's carried out only by producers, which, as we know now, are also called autotrophs. And primary production produces something called biomass. This is the amount of living organic material in an ecosystem. So biomass is all the living organic material in the whole entire ecosystem. Primary production is different in different ecosystems, so it varies. Okay, so let's take a look. Now, I'm not ever going to make you memorize this chart. However, this is just something kind of cool to look at. Okay, so this is different primary productions. Now take a look at the open ocean. Okay, and that makes sense. We don't really have a whole lot of plants or primary producers in the open ocean. We have some, but not as much as, say, the tropical rainforest. Okay, so that has a lot of different primary producers. That's going to make a lot of the biomass. It's going to provide for a lot of living organic things. So energy supply is going to limit the length of a food chain, which makes sense, okay? Because the length of a food chain can only go so high as the energy can allow. Okay, so this is a pyramid of production. It's going to illustrate the cumulative loss of energy transfer within a food chain. It's really important to understand that within every single level, some energy is lost. So remember, we talked about in class that those arrows represent a transfer of energy. Okay, so the reason why humans are, we're at the top of the food chain, we eat meat, sometimes we do eat lettuce and things like that are primary producers. However, every single time we go up a level, we lose energy. So this is kind of an interesting graph to look at. So producers, kilocalories is a measure of energy. Okay, so anytime you see this right here, think it's a measurement of energy. As we go up the pyramid, look at how much energy we're losing. Okay, so the grasshopper only gets 1,000 calories out of the 10,000 that the flower got from the sun. And look here at the mouse, only got 100 calories out of the 1,000 from the grasshopper. And then tertiary, they get the least. Okay, that's why they have to eat probably a lot more frequently, because they don't get enough energy. So kind of a connection to why meat is such a luxury for humans. Okay, so the dynamics of energy flow also, so this right here, the dynamics of energy flow also applies to humans. When we eat meat, it's a luxury. So take a look at this. Look how many more humans that the earth could sustain if they only ate primary producers. Okay, they use corn as an example, because cattle are fed corn. So when cattle are fed corn and then humans eat cattle or beef, it's a huge loss of energy. So humans have to eat more to get the same amount of energy. So not as many humans can be fed. So we're losing all that energy when we could just be getting it from primary producers. So that is why meat should be considered a luxury. It's not something that we should be eating even every day. So that is the end of video 2. I hope you guys enjoyed.